and welcome to Be Informed. My name is Kyle Buhariwala, and I've founded Be Informed to help people make good decisions. Today's session will be exploring the topic of leadership, and we'll be joined by Jake Harris of Upper Limit Business and Mindset Coaching, who'll be taking us through how to engage and align a team. And today's session is a sort of a continuation of this sort of two-part leadership series. Jake previously presented earlier in February this month on how to be an inspiring leader. So if you missed that session or if you want to revisit it, you can go to our YouTube channel and watch Jake's presentation. It was quite a engaging and interesting sort of discussion that we had. So today's session is being recorded, and before I proceed, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. The information in the seminar is current as of this month and is general information only. So if you do have any specific inquiries about your particular business operations, personal sort of approach to being a leader or managing a team, then please engage with Jake or any other professional that you wish so that you can get some tailored advice about how you can improve or just continue the great work that you do. So from a housekeeping perspective, Jake will sort of take us through the seminar for about 25 minutes, after which we'll go into Q&A. So we'll start off with some questions that we've received ahead of the session, and then we'll go to any questions that are asked live in the session. If you do have a question, just message me in the chat function and I can then ask Jake the question so he can answer it for everyone to hear. There's also a one-page handout that Jake has kindly prepared. So following today's session, I'll email that to registered participants so that you have a handy one-page guide on what was discussed today, and we'll have Jake's details on it too, so you can always give him a call or engage with services if you need further help. And yes, the session is being recorded, so if you do have to drop up early or have to come in and go as you wish, then don't worry, you can watch the entire session on our YouTube channel and share it with family and friends if you found that it was helpful. So I'll now pass on to Jake, who will take us through the seminar on how to engage and align a team.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Carl. If you could have the next slide, I'll just jump straight into it. So tonight I'm talking about engagement and alignment, which are a couple of factors in really getting a successful team. So in the first part, I talked a little bit about the kind of person to be as a leader, someone who creates clear vision, which I will dip into elements of tonight. This is the other part, and this is the team-facing stuff. So engagement and alignment are the two phrases I'll talk about a lot. And just basically the best way to think about this. So first of all, if you can think of a time where you've been part of a team where everything just worked, maybe you've experienced it as a member of that team. Maybe it's something you've experienced in another business organization. You've been on the customer side of things, but it's one of those situations where everyone just knew what to expect from one another. And it felt like good results were really easy to produce. That's the way I think about it. Almost like they just happen automatically, right? Engaged and aligned teams are what really produce these kind of results and these kind of environments. So it's like when the team becomes a really well-oiled machine, it just produces results and drives together towards a vision, which is a lot of what I talked about in the first presentation. Tonight, I really want to talk about some key levers that you can pull in your business to build an engaged and aligned team. And these are very simple, small things you can do over and over, but really cumulatively, they add up to big stuff to build the right kind of culture that produces these kind of results. So first point I have up on the page there is about when it all just works. So that's what I'm talking about at the moment. There are a few factors. So in the first presentation, I talked a lot about a leader with a clear and digestible vision and how to be that kind of person, right? I will summarize the key points in this one as they relate to the presentation, but definitely if you want to go into that deep dive a bit more on the YouTube channel, otherwise I've got some more content on that. Really happy to answer questions, but basically, for the purposes of tonight, I'm going to presume that you're a leader with a clear vision for the team to get behind, so you know where you're going, right? The reason that part of it is so important is that the team needs to be able to engage with something, and they need to be able to align towards something. So that's where the vision part of it comes in. That's the clear vision. And then just really, I put it there, the digestible part, they have to be able to sink their teeth into it, right? Really, all we need then is just good leaders within the organization to help deliver and lead on that vision. A little bit more on the terms that I'm going to use tonight. So engaged and aligned, right? So first of all, I've got there about an engaged team. So when a team is engaged, it means they're actively working together to get the job done. So they're working and they're working hard to get that job done. So meaning they're bought into the team, they're bought into one another, and they're bought into the bigger vision of what they're trying to do, right? An analogy to talk about this would be like you've got a group of people in a kayak. Everyone's rowing and they're rowing in sync. So they're rowing hard, right? There are no passengers on that kayak. Everyone is actively engaged in driving it forward. The second part, when a team's aligned, that's like them all pulling in the same desirable direction. And again, that's pulling towards that vision I was talking about. It's pulling in that same direction towards that desirable outcome. So again, this is both the individuals are working towards that, and then the teams as a whole are working together towards that outcome, right? So what I mean by that is like departments and individuals aren't working across purposes. It's not me versus you. It's not my success in spite of your success within the teams. It's not finance versus HR or anything like that. It's the teams and the individuals working to move towards that outcome we're talking about, right? When you get both of those factors right, fast and meaningful progress towards that vision I'm talking about is a real given, right? And I think a really handy thing to talk about at this point is some signs that sort of show you are in this space. And, you know, you might have one or two of these, you might have all of them, and that's fantastic. But seeing one or two of these pop up sort of tells you that you're moving in the right direction. So really helpful to calibrate with. So I'm talking about a team that really works well together and they're keen to pick up the slack from one another. So they get things done and then it's like, bang, on to the next one. Or what can I help you with? You're a little overloaded in this team. How can we do that? That's a really healthy sign we're looking forward to here. Talking about a team that produces great results without the need for constant supervision. So they're not always just doing tasks and then coming back to you for more instruction. They don't need you to look over the shoulder. Not that anyone does, but they don't need you to look over their shoulder to produce good results. I'm talking about a team where team members are constantly promoted from within. That's a really healthy sign of a team that is achieving this kind of stuff. People step up to the next level and take on new things and create space behind them. Talking about a team where putting in the hard yards is cool and people want to thrive. So it's not seen as like dorky or undesirable to do hard and interesting work and really band together to put in the hard yards to deliver. The team want to do that. I think most importantly, it's a team that's having fun while they're producing these great results. Fun's an interesting way to look at it, but it's like a team at play, right? They're producing results, they're doing good things, it just works, and there's sort of a beautiful harmony about it, which I think that's exactly what happens when a team is engaged and aligned to a clear vision with good leaders, right? Which all sounds pretty good. Let's dive into how we make that real in your business. So next slide, please, Carl. Alignment, that's our first point here. So when I say alignment, I just basically mean getting everyone on the same page, doing the right things at the right time to progress towards a target. So there's a few things implied within that, right? I'm going to say people here, I mean people within the team. So people need to know where they're going. So that's that clarity of vision part, and that's the direction. A really simple way to think about that, I'm in Melbourne. Clarity of vision is like saying, am I going to Brisbane or am I going to Perth? Both destinations, both involve moving very different directions. So that's a good way to think about alignment. Where are we off to, right? So the team and the people need to have clarity of vision, where we're trying to go. People need to know how we're going to get there. So that's where the leaders need to be charting the course. That's the stuff about the leaders getting that one step out in front and making it digestible and illuminating that path in front of the team so we know how to do it. People need to understand their role in getting there, right? So they need to understand their own outcomes and their own role in taking the team to that destination. which I will dive into a bit more later, but super important people actually understand what they're responsible for and what their purpose is in creating this greater journey we want to go on. People need the right people around them, and they need to be able to work with them. So this is your systems and your structures. This is thinking about how the team interact, but it's also thinking about who's along on the team to go on that journey with us to take us to the place we want to go. We really do need the right team, and so much of the makeup is an important part in actually getting a high performing team that is engaged and aligned. And I'll speak about a few reasons why lacking team members is important later on. But suffice to say that it's super important in having the team to go on the journey with you. And then I think most importantly, along the way, people need a way to self-calibrate and stay on track. Now, initially, when someone's newer to a business, that looks like more leadership and development. But as time goes, that really healthy sign I was talking about, team members can self-calibrate and stay on track. And ideally, they do this across time without needing to really ask you what the next step is, right? How do we do that? So a couple of really simple tools I want to talk about you can use to align the team on what your vision is. The first one I have there is about really it's just communicating the vision regularly. Now, I talked about this in the first presentation. A vision is no good if it's just stuck in your head. It's really hard for people to guess what you're thinking. So great ways to get this across, to paint a vivid picture in your team's mind. First one I have there is about concrete and concepts. So when you introduce something new, if it's a new idea you're bringing across the team, a new vision, we want to play this at the level of concept, and we want to give big picture stuff. So we want to talk about analogies, metaphors. To give an example of this, when I explain to someone what mindset coaching is like, if I was bringing on a new member of my team, I might talk about, I'm going to be a little bit like, so an analogy, it's a little bit like, I'm a little bit like an optometrist for a business. I'm going to hold up some lenses and I'm going to see if one is better or worse so they can see their situation more clearly. Or you might say, I'm a bit like a psychologist for a business and I'm going to help you really work through things and give the business owner support tools. Whatever that is with your vision, when you're introducing new concepts, using analogies, it's a bit like, is super helpful for the team in getting that big picture, right? Beyond that, though, we want to be able to zoom in and give tangible examples of that. So in the last presentation, I talked about milestones along the way, mapping some of those out. So again, if we're driving to Brisbane, all right, we're probably going through Sydney on the way. Really helps the team self-calibrate on that stuff and know when we are on track. And then beyond that, when we are communicating, again, to reiterate on a point from the first presentation, we want to get things across in a way that is valuable, visual, and visceral. So basically that just means inherently the thing you are describing, the place you want to go, has to be desirable to go to. That's the valuable part. The visual of it is you want to create a picture in their head of what you're thinking so that they can picture it in their head. And then the visceral part is like you want to make it emotionally linked so that they feel what it would be like to do that and it's emotionally desirable. The next point I have there is about rapid and meaningful feedback. So lots of different ways you can do this. I'll talk a little bit tonight about some ways that I like to do this. What we want to do here is foster a culture where people are given meaningful feedback and they're giving it to one another. And basically what that does is that keeps everyone calibrated on the same page, and it really needs to start with you. So I'm a big fan of micro feedback on the go. So I'm talking about rapid, fairly to the point in a useful way. I think so many people make the mistake here of saving this until a performance review, and that's such a weird behavior to do because you don't want to have surprises when it comes to performance review time, and you don't want to be referencing something now. We're at the end of Feb. I don't want to be telling someone in my team about something I think they did wrong in mid-November. I haven't got the context. I've moved on. So I really like it in the moment. A couple of models I would use for this. One is called SBI feedback, which stands for situation, behavior, and impact. Basically, you talk about the specific situation. You talk about the observable behavior, so you don't talk about what you think the person was thinking at the time. You talk about the observable behavior that was right or wasn't right for you, and then you talk about the impact on you or the team. Really is a nice way to bring it across. Another really popular method is one from the book, The 1 Minute Manager, or that series you might have come across. They talk about called a 1 minute redirect, and it's basically the same thing where you address something when you become aware of it, and you focus on the behavior, not the person. So focusing on the thing you'd like to correct as a behavior or would like to see done differently, and then reinforcing that that person has value to you and the organization. I think it's a really good way to get it across quickly. Really simply, like, these are those cliches you've heard before. This is like you get what you tolerate, and this is the stuff like what you permit, you promote. I think they're really good to anchor it in, because the important part about this is it's not a big deal if you deal with it at the time. So feedback all the time is a huge tool in this, and there are some really good frameworks you can use for it. Final point on the tools there, it's not so much a tool as it is a concept, this one, but it's empowered key position players. So basically what I'm talking about here is investing time in the people who other people look to in the team. So you don't want to be the only leader in the team. Empowered to me means they have clarity over their outcomes, and then they've got ownership, which is both given to them and it's taken by them. I think the way we think about this is people need to take responsibility. You can't just dump it on them. You have to offer it up, and they both have to take it and have a way to be responsible, which is basically about you letting go of an element of control and giving them a chance to fail, experiment, grow, being responsible for those outcomes. When you do this well, it's probably one of the most impactful things you can do with your team to really drive them forward, because then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 advocates who people already look to, who are aligned to your vision. So it just makes it so much easier to disseminate which step you're at, what the next step is, and help people self-organize. When you do this stuff well, everyone's rowing in the same direction. So the next part comes in, which is the engagement, which is like the grunt behind that rowing in the kayak analogy. Next slide, please. I've broken the engagement one up into 2 different areas. So the number one factor we need to talk about in creating engaged teams is basically making it safe and desirable to show up day after day. So dead, injured people don't come to work. That's the extreme of it. Further than that, though, we really want to make sure that people have their human needs met, right? On a base level, and I'll talk about a few different types. Now, this sounds super obvious, but it's so often overlooked. I get it, right? When you're a business owner, you are trying to produce results. Or if you're a leader in a team, you're trying to produce results. And it's like high performers particularly are super used to having high delivery standards, quickly moving through things, delivering bang, 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 on we go, right? We want to get stuff done. But if it's not safe to show up for the team, you'll never be able to engage them. They'll be in pure survival mode if those instincts are getting triggered. So the first concept here is, I want to unpack a little bit, is the second point, which is about safe from and safe to. So these are the 2 ways I think about these safety kind of points. And it basically means that we've got to realize that humans are motivated to move away from danger and toward pleasure or self-realization. And what I'm talking about here, it's like pleasure or self-realization. People are motivated towards like going to get a Ferrero Rocher, a chocky, but equally they're also motivated towards becoming the best version of themselves. So thinking about both those things, so away from danger towards pleasure or self-realization. So by extension, then we can sort of think of this as 2 ways. There's safe from things, which is like I'm safe from harm, bad things like falling rocks or dangerous work situations or bullying, this could be. And also on the flip side, we're talking about safe to, which is like safe to do good things or safe to do desirable things. So like I'm talking about here, I feel safe coming into work, being myself. I feel safe to speak up in this group and know that my opinion will be heard and respected as it deserves. Super important. So as I talk through it, the most practical way you can apply this to your business is just run a bit of a mental checklist, or even better, like jot down notes and actually ask yourself how you can move people away from danger as they perceive the danger, and how you can move them towards a pleasure or self-realization as I talk about all these factors. So make a bit of a list on this stuff. And I'm talking really small things, and removing roadblocks is one of the most important things you can do. So typically we think of a workplace safety as like work on high ladders or things that need a high vis. That's certainly like the classic physical hazards we talk about. And there's a whole, that's an established industry, and there's a lot of information on that. So it's super important. I won't touch on that too much tonight, because I think there is just so much great information on that you can refer to. And I think it's really well established what's known and needed in that space. More recently, though, there's been a shift in terms of sort of workplace obligation in terms of safety for people. And one of these new key movements is an idea you might have heard around psychosocial hazards. So psychosocial hazards are on the radar now, which you may have seen. And like, again, there's a lot of resources, and I'll unpack a few that I think are really interesting and useful tonight. But psychosocial hazards, it's sort of a fancy way of saying it's things that, or ways that people feel unsafe in their heads or interacting in a group, right? And at the moment, there are at least a dozen. So some lists sort of have 13, 14, 15, but at least about a dozen in all the major bodies. I'll share them and just quickly work through a few of them tonight and highlight a few, sort of going from like most obvious to least obvious. The list I've got tonight, I've got from Safe Work Australia, which is sort of an industry body that suggests a lot of these things. WorkSafe have a lot of great resources, or like your state resource as well around workplace safety will have a lot of them. So basically, just to work through them. So a couple of fairly obvious ones, like poor physical environments are a hazard, violence and aggression in the workplace are a hazard, bullying is a hazard, harassment, including sexual and gender-based harassment, conflict or poor workplace relationships and interactions. Sort of the more obvious ones. I think this is where they get more interesting, and this being newer to some people. Things like job demand. So like job demands being too high or too low. Too low is the one that people don't really think about, but like no one gets out of bed in the morning to come to work and feel useless. If you're sitting around twiddling your thumbs, not a great scenario and not highly engaging, right? Low job control. So that one's basically about not feeling like you could just be replaced by a computer easily, or you're told task by task exactly what you have to do. You don't have much control over it, which ties into autonomy. Poor support, I think a pretty obvious one, but often not thought of. So who do I go to with questions? Lack of role clarity, which is massive and a much more complex one, but I'll come to this more on connectedness and meaning. But if you're not connected to your role and to outcomes, it's super demotivating for people if they're not clear on what they're getting paid to do. It makes them feel unsafe. Poor organizational change management, bit of a classic one. Inadequate reward and recognition, which I'll dive into a lot more, I think is super important. Poor organizational justice, which is like saying that teammates see someone else do something bad and they don't see results for it, so it's endorsed. Traumatic events or material that you have to face in the workplace, I think a little more obvious, but super important. And then there's others like remote and isolated work. So does the team member feel part of the team? So much you can do in this space to avoid them. And like the most impactful things are super simple. The best thing you can do is actually know and understand them. And I'd literally just go through and think about that safe from, safe to stuff. Can I remove any of these hazards? Because so many of them are really easy to nut out, and they're such, they're just so powerful. Like you get them right and it just works. It's super important for the team. A concept on that one, I think about it as oxygen in the room. So I'm an absolute golf fanatic. I think about a situation where, like, if Tiger Woods came around and we sat down at the table and he said to me, I want to answer any questions you have and talk about the game, I would be pretty engaged and enthralled in that situation. Now imagine all the oxygen is sucked out of the room. How much do I care about that situation? I don't at all anymore. All I care about is getting oxygen, right? I'm thinking about getting out of the room and getting oxygen. This is a bit like what safety is like, right? Until you have oxygen in the room for that person, until they feel safe, nothing else matters. So you're not going to get a highly engaged team member if they don't feel safe coming to work or they think they're going to get bullied. They're in survival mode. They're not going to get into that thriving space we're talking about, right? I think it's just such a powerful concept, figuring out what that person's oxygen is, what makes them feel safe to breathe so they don't have to think about it. Just got a little story there at the end from when I was like a much newer manager managing a bigger team for the first time. Basically, I was super driven and I was looking to get the most out of everyone and really drive it along. And had a team, and I got along really well with a lot of the team members. We produced good results, and there was a team member who was like objectively a really good worker, who I didn't feel like I was connecting and really gelling with and bringing the best out of. And it just got to the point where, and like, I think I was definitely at fault here in this story. It got to the point where I basically said, like, what is this? Like, you're engaged, you're really capable, you're doing great work, but I feel like we've got a weird friction and you're not engaged with me and what I put forward. What can I do to make that better? What can I do to make our relationship better there? Am I imagining this? And basically she said to me, like, well, starting with a good morning would be nice. And she then detailed to me the fact that, I come in, I'm rushing around, she's working, I didn't take the time to acknowledge her. And that was just the simplest thing, because to me, I'm getting on with the job, people know what they're doing. I gave recognition, but I wasn't saying good morning to her in the morning. From then on, it was literally 30 seconds out of the way, find where she was, every team member for that matter. Hey, how you going? Good morning. Great to have you here. I'll touch more on this later, but that's what it's like to make people feel seen and heard. And again, everyone's oxygen is different. For her, it's being acknowledged for coming into work. It's being acknowledged as a member of that team and feeling seen. I wasn't doing that, and almost instantly by putting that back in, all these other problems dissolved. All these points are about how we make it safe to show up. That needs to be a given for people to get into a high performance kind of area, which is what I'd love to talk to now. So Carl, next slide if you could. This is the stuff, to me, the more fun side of engagement. This is like helping me become me and chockies. So this is like the self-realization stuff, right? High performance stuff. So this is a team that is aligned with good leaders with a good vision. And now they feel safe and they're not thinking about survival mode at all. We're talking about getting into thriving. Now, again, the best way to work through this is have a bit of a checklist in your head, really simple checklist, and just think about things that you can do and implement on a daily basis and build into your daily routines, and check a couple of these boxes. I'm talking like 30 seconds here, 30 seconds there, a team meeting here, a team meeting there. It doesn't have to be massive and all the way, and it doesn't have to be all you. Think about the key position players in your team. Again, you can pass this stuff on with them. You can share these resources to get them thinking. One of the most powerful things you could do is line up the key people in your team and talk about some of these factors and how you could bring them into the everyday workday. So factors that help people and teams grow. Recognition and feedback is one of the huge ones, and I've talked about that a lot. So you've got to give feedback. Good, bad, indifferent. Give feedback. It makes people feel seen and heard. I think the SBI model I shared before is fantastic, and keep in mind you can use that for recognition as well. So, hey, just now when you were doing this, it had a fantastic impact on the team. Thanks. It doesn't have to be just words though. I've got a 3-year-old daughter, and a little habit we've built, which I think is really worth sharing. I talk about it a lot. Whenever she does something that really tests her, or she has like a really good crack at something, basically I help her lock in that good feeling by just put out the hand and say, hey, high five, mate. And we go, bam. And that becomes a sort of infectious thing. She loves doing that and really locks it in. That was a great thing to do. And she had a crack. Regardless of the outcome, she got in there and had a crack. I do that with some different clients now. Some people it's a fist bump. Some people it's a pat on the back. Finding the right tone for you and the team is super important, but it doesn't have to be huge. Little gestures go so far. Think about how you can build those into your day. Building a culture like this, the way I think about it, and this is a phrase borrowed again from the 1 Minute Manager, but like we want to catch people doing things right. You want to build a culture, and that's a really good sign of a team that does this, is like they want to see one another doing things really well, going above and beyond, and they call it out to one another. And again, it's just really tiny things, but hey, I saw that. Great stuff. You're on board. Next point is growth opportunities. I like to think about this in a negative. You can't be a place where careers come to die. So you have to give people a chance to move up, to self-become, to self-realize. It doesn't always mean promotions, but it's just meaningful ways to challenge people in a way that grows them within the role as it's aligned to the business. Meaningful ways to stretch that person. So it could be training, it could be time, it could be mentoring, it could be resources. Keep in mind, you can supply opportunities for people to go and develop themselves on work time as well. So it might be something aligned. It might not be at all. A lot of organizations do that now where you have free work, where you can just learn anything for half a day. I think that's a super attractive and effective way to help people grow. Next point is autonomy and trust. So again, you got to know your people. You got to give them the why and the what, along with the tools and the resources to do it. And then you just trust them to do the good stuff themselves. That's how teams produce great results. You've got to get out of their way for them to have autonomy, and you've got to trust them to produce it. Otherwise, you'll never grow beyond a certain point. I think really simple questions daily, like what would 10% more trusting look like? Challenge yourself to 10 or 20%, whatever your number is, but like what would the next step of being more trusting with my team look like? Asking yourself great questions like that opens up a lot of doorways. Meaning connectedness, really simply go back to the last presentation and watch that. There's a lot on in there, but It's basically helping the team understand the impact of their work and making it easier to score and see progress. So make the work feel meaningful. If you're a values aligned business, that's super easy to do. If you do physical work that can be seen at the end of a day, I think that's super easy to do. But if you're like a lot of information businesses now and knowledge work, you do need to spend a bit more time actually helping people connect to the results so they can feel good about the work they've done and they can actually see progress. Just a little outside reference here, this OC Tanner 2024 Workplace Culture Survey. I could have picked 10 different ones. This one works really well with what I was talking about, though. They'll all come back with the same stuff. This is like 42,000 people across the world in larger organizations, but I think it completely translates to small organizations as well. So the question was, what's the most important driver of great work? 37% of respondents said, recognize me, which I think is massive. Like that might be the good morning. That's saying, I see you and I see your contribution. That's it. That's free. 10 team members, you could knock that over in 5 minutes a day. Massive. The next sort of 40% all group under very similar categories. The next one being nothing. I'm self-motivated, which we can touch on later, but aligns. Then we've got inspire me, which I talked about a lot in the first one. And then there's autonomy, which I've talked a lot about here. So the thing that's interesting for me there is 3 out of 4 people, so 74% if you add those up, pretty much are just about saying, give me autonomy, inspire me, and recognize me. So we're talking about the role of good leaders. And then the remaining 26 are like basically saying, pay me, train me, promote me, and other stuff. 3 out of 4 people can be reached with some recognition, some trust, some autonomy. Again, really small things, but you've got to build them into the week. How do you make people feel seen and heard and like their contribution matters? Again, to reiterate, it's feedback, it's recognition, and it's meaningful challenge. So it's understanding the people that work for you and it's finding ways to stretch them, saying, look, I saw that output, it was great. What do you think the next level would look like? How can I support you in that? Really simply, it's the small things again that compound. I would just look for 1 or 2 things per day. If you did 1 piece of feedback more and 1 piece of recognition more, the results in a month's time, it would be remarkable on the team. It's that simple. I'm talking 2 1-minute interactions per day in that space and encouraging your key position players to do it. Next slide, please, Carl. Thanks. So bring it all back together. So the key points in this, hugely valuable stuff that makes a huge difference in the business. And there's a lot of moving parts, but exactly like I'm preaching here, make it digestible and chunk it down into lots of little pieces. I'll try and do the same for you here. So basically it's starting with a clear vision. You've got to know if you're going to Brisbane or Perth. It's pretty hard to set it on a team to 2 destinations at once. Communicate it clearly and often in digestible ways. Really simple. Have ways, so like team meetings, stand-ups, communication to calibrate and recalibrate, right? This talks about this is you. So recalibrate and see how you're going as a leader. This is with the individuals in the team and talking about their progress as individuals. And it's talking about the teams and how we're going. Is the team on track? And are the teams within teams on track as well? We need to build a team and build a culture around this stuff. Culture is like the thing that dictates decisions. It's how we do things around here. That's what you're looking for, is to reinforce that over and over. This is how we do things around here. And we want to make it safe and desirable to show up and grow. Again, to reiterate that point, we need to keep people out of survival mode and have them in thriving mode. Remove the hazards to give them the opportunity to feel safe coming and showing up as themselves and blossoming. Think about it like fertile soil. You've got to have fertile soil for people to grow. That's safety. Finally, recognizing individuals on the journey with you. It's not just you as the leader. People are coming with you. It's team-based. If you're going far, you need a good team with you. We have to find ways to recognize the individuals. It's not just your job. So again, we want to create a culture that's doing that. That's all the really good stuff, right? That's what makes work a joy, and it creates a space of transformation. A business that transforms people and transcends and really gives them something that they cherish and remember for a lifetime, which is highly desirable because that's a fun place to work in, right? That's what I want for my business and my interactions, and I want that for yours too. So get in there and do the good stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. That was a very thorough and engaging presentation, so thank you for going through that level of detail.
Pleasure.
Jake's details are on screen, so if you do wish to contact him, take a note. His details will also be in the one-page handout, which will be shared after the session today by email to those that registered. So you can always keep in touch with Jake. The session is being recorded, so if you have joined late, you can watch the entire session on the YouTube channel. And you can also watch the previous session too, where Jake spoke about how to be an inspiring leader. So you can watch these two sessions together on the topic of leadership. We'll now jump into Q&A, and like last time, Jake, you've covered off most of the questions that we've received. So I think that's great, right? Just we have I might group these together because I think it's in relation to Jake. You know, we've got leaders within teams, of course, but then we've also got the team members. And what I think that the questions are sort of getting through from the people that have asked it is just around what happens if you don't have passionate, motivated, engaging team members. You know, you can try all these techniques, right? And at the end of the day, all they're interested in really is just doing the work, getting paid, and clocking off, so to speak. You know, what sort of advice would you have if the team leader is identifying that sort of behavior, whether it's positive or negative, right? And what sort of advice do you have to sort of help them, I guess, sort of transform, those behaviors? Because, you get it all the time, right? In various teams, you can say good morning, you can definitely say it's safe to show up and, be engaging and aligning from that perspective. But if they're just not going to buy in, what are your sort of thoughts on that, Jake?
Yeah, great question. I mean, to reference another survey, and I haven't got the exact statistics off my head, but I know like Gallup did one around team engagement, I think it was last year, and pretty much you're looking at 30% will have a real drive towards being highly engaged, what you consider there. About 60% will sit somewhere in the middle on a good team, and on like a less high performing engaged team, you'll have anywhere up to sort of 30% of people actively disengaged. And it talked about actively disengaged. So like, to use the kayak example, that's 3 people rowing forwards, 3 or 4 in the middle, sort of coasting along, and 3 rowing in different directions. Coming back to that, I think that the most important one, as I talked about, is making people feel seen, heard, feel felt. Like, addressing it is the most important thing in any sense. So like, first and foremost, that fertile ground I'm talking about, that's a given, and that's the best way to get people in and give them the best chance. If you are confident you're doing that and someone is in the right mix-up, I think addressing it is the most important thing, and frequently and in escalating ways. So you don't have to save it all for the big chat in 6 months and then just dump everything on them. Again, like I was saying before, I think performance reviews, it should just be an endorsement of what's already been discussed. Nothing should particularly come as a surprise. And if you've done it well throughout, it really is an opportunity to talk about how you grow and recognize the work done again. Really simply, it's just about creating that environment and then engaging with the individual in front of you, giving that feedback to say, here's what I'm sort of seeing, acknowledging it for what it is. And I think then giving those continual points of opt-in, like working with so many people, everyone has a life outside of work as well, and they bring so much to them. I think you're nuts to pigeonhole someone as like a low performer forever, for example, or like they're a low engagement individual. So I think one of the things that so many leaders miss is those continuous opportunities to opt back in. I think I talked about it in the first presentation I did with you, but the concept of rockets and like rocks and rockets, I think it's a really useful way to think about it. In every team makeup, you have people who want to move through the ranks quickly and they're passionate and high engagement, who are your rockets. You sort of stand the chance to really benefit from them and go quickly, but as well, you're more likely to lose them quickly to new growth opportunities. On the other side, and this is where you need the team mix up, you need people who are rocks as well, who are very happy in that phase of life to be stable and stay in that place. So only you as a leader can really see what that team mix-up needs to be. In terms of actively addressing it, I just like reflecting back what you're seeing, deciding if it is acceptable or not, and trying to give someone support to grow into that space. The sooner you address these things, the better. One model I love of this stuff is really getting involved with your employees and your team early on their development and giving them really good feedback on where they're at and how they're going. And then if it is becoming clear that they aren't aligned, calling that out as well, and really giving them a chance to say, like, almost to the point where you'd say, like, can I invest in helping you get a job you would love? Really powerful idea. And I think it benefits both parties, because you don't want someone sort of silently resenting you on the job and feeling trapped. So much of the time it's about giving someone a choice. So it's really important individual to individual. If I'm talking on a general level, though, it's about really just continuously calibrating with the person and making sure that their view of reality isn't completely distorted to yours.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thanks, Jake. Another sort of question that we have, right, and I'm grouping a few of the questions we've got together. We talk about teams, and there's a thread here that I can see where there's a lot of flux right now in the market, right? And a few of the people that have asked questions are sort of directing it towards the fact that when we do hire new people, right, and we've got our existing people as well, it can sort of change the dynamic in the team. I think they're sort of observing that they probably dedicate a bit, of course, they dedicate more time to the new starters to help them sort of, get up to speed and get involved and get engaged in the work that's happening at the time. But then I think there's potential for those that are currently within the team to sort of lose that level of engagement because they're probably not seeing to be, preferenced as much, or getting that level of time that they need. What sort of advice would you have for leaders when you are hiring people to make sure that you're not forgetting those that have always been with you or are currently with you, so you can sort of maintain that dynamic and not sort of get existing team members to think that you're probably favouring the new people.
Great question.
Even though that's probably not the intent, right?
Yeah, but I mean, in these senses, perception is reality, and it's very easy if you're a long-time employee and you're a rock, like I've talked about, to see people whizzing past you consistently. Like an idea that I've loved, but I haven't seen anyone execute on, which I think would work really well, would be like copying a illegal guns amnesty week type situation, where you say, you know what, like, you're not going to get in trouble if you turn in your illegal guns this week. We'll just take them, no questions asked. Same thing around if there's someone who wanted to like effectively opt back into the business. You know what, like, call out the things that you don't think you've been doing well. Let's meet you where you are and take you on that track, once or twice a year. Equally, I think it's really important to have, like I was saying, those continuous conversations, so that ideally you never get to that point. And that's where, if you're doing this well on a continual basis, like with a coaching mentality, most teams, depending on the size and type of work, you probably only need a one-to-one every, like, I reckon weekly or fortnightly is pretty good for most teams in terms of leverage and depending on what they do. But if you're doing that, like 80% of the problems in your business can be solved with good one-on-ones. You'll know that. Really simply, one I love from a manager I had early in my career, it's like sort of a 6-word performance appraisal type situation. It's basically like, get in for a coffee or go for a drive, and you just say, how are you going? And they'll give you like the surface level answer, and there's like, no, like, how are you actually going? Get down to the depth of it, open up conversations like that. So I think, like, use journeys, use opportunities like that where you are away from work, create a safe space to talk about these things and make it quite clear that there is an opportunity for your team to grow. And then really importantly, that's one of the key questions I'll be asking of my key position players is, how are you developing your teams? What do they care about? What are their aspirations? What are their engagement levels like? I think alignment can be a lot easier because it's just about distilling messages and it's a lot more tangible at times. Engagement is a continual Yeah, well, it's like a pipeline. You have to just keep feeding it all the time, or eventually it's going to drizzle out at the other end instead of flowing. So I would look to my key position players, whether they're managers as such or other people that are influential, those that the team turn to as well, and have their finger on the pulse with that stuff. And I'd love them to bring that to me to say, hey, like this person, I know they've been traditionally disengaged. I'm getting little sparks. I think there's an opportunity to do this. I would want my key position players to feel empowered to try that out.
That's great. That's very important too, as you've said. Your key position players, they can be managers in your team or team leaders, but there can also be other people that just the team looks to for knowledge or support.
Well, I mean, even on that front, I see it all the time. It's quite often the person who whinges the most in the team who is screaming out to be a leader more so because like they're whinging because they want something to be different. I think when people go silent, that's more of a concern. I wouldn't overlook that person who can be seen as a whinger for, like, quite often that's a cry for more engagement or opportunity. So, looking to that a different role, if they are willing to say, not just whinge, but say how they would like things to be different, that's a really good sign. And they're people that can be tapped into quite often can be seen as dissenting, but they're actually calling out for more engagement and to engage others. You get them aligned and everything changes very quickly.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's right. No, that's great, Jake. And final question, not directly on point with this topic, but just around, there's a team and there are leaders, right? The feedback loop up, so how receptive should a leader be to their approach to, engaging and aligning a team? Oftentimes in the industry that, companies that I've worked for, it's pretty ad hoc, right? In terms of giving feedback, up, to your manager or to, other managers above you. What are your thoughts on, does that drive better team engagement? If you encourage that feedback to be gathered and then passed on and then actioned by the relevant managers, leaders.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Huge fan of that because like anything operational, not anything, but like the vast majority of any operational or delivery improvements will come from the people doing the work because they are close to it. I think it's so important to have both that 30,000 foot view and the ground level view. They're both useful for different reasons. The way I would deal with that in a business is you want to set up twofold, like structured communications or forums where people can, at different viewpoints, come together to work on problems. But as well, I would structure the ad hoc. We're asking good questions because so much of, to use an example where you're talking about like the ground level stuff, a lot of the times I see managers sort of like debuff these things because they don't have context. Yeah, that's a good idea, but it's not relevant because we're trying to do this. The thing that you want to structure in is the ability to, metaphorically here, but lift your team up to your viewpoint regularly as well. And that's what good communication and vision is it helps them see a problem they're motivated to solve and do better at and create a better outcome from a higher perspective as well, so that they can go back down to ground level and do better stuff. I use the analogy in my business a lot where I talk about if you're building a business, it's like imagine you've got a town inside of a mountain range. You've got to be down the ground putting the things in. You've got to build your hospital, your roads, your whatever. If you were smart about it, every now and then you'd have viewing stations you built in or a drone overhead. And once a week, you'd go up to these viewing stations where you can see things from above, look in and say, are my roads straight? Is my school right next to my prison? That doesn't make sense. Is my hospital near my aged care centre? So you need both. And I always like structuring these things in. You're probably sick of me saying it in every Q&A, but have calendar reminders in with powerful prompts. I think it's one of the best things you can do. Journal, reflect, but I would talk about it with the team, the key position players, like having one or two opportunities where people can come together from different levels to work on the big problems of the organization with the right context and boundaries and give them ownership. And then just structuring the little ones as well so that it is easy to give meaningful feedback up and down so that people understand one another's role within achieving.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's great, Jake. Thank you for that. Well, that brings us to the end of the formalities. Jake's details are on screen, so if you do wish to contact him about leadership or mindset growth, business operational coaching, the like, Jake's sort of your guy. Jake's presented in the past as well previously, before the other session in February. And we've had some great response and feedback. So we thank you, Jake, for taking the time to share your knowledge and wisdom with the community.
Absolute pleasure, mate. Cheers.
It brings us to the end now. So as I've said, there's a session's being recorded. So the entire session will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, so you can watch it at your leisure and share it with family and friends. If you found it interesting and you learned something from it. There's also a one-page handout which Jake has kindly prepared, so I'll be sharing that with the registered participants by email. So you have a one-page document on hand with Jake's details on it as well. And we rely on word of mouth, and our social channels are on screen. So please do subscribe to us and follow us. And if you found it useful, share it with others as well. And we have another session in March and a few others lined up for the next few months. So you can go to our Eventbrite page and check in to see any session that you might find interesting, or forward it to someone that you think might need some help. But with all of that brings us to the end. So thank you, Jake, again, and thank you for those that joined us, and have a great evening.
Thanks, Carl.
Bye for now.